Hello.
Hello,
How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
I saw you're at one of Howard's talks we recently published.
Yeah,
It's good to see you here though.
and nice to see you also.
Do you have any pressing questions on your mind bubbling up at all or?
Uh, all the questions have yearly washed out from my system.
I haven't watched any of the video with you and Howard, so I don't know anything about you. So this is a blank slate here. So what
Tabula rasa, tabula rasa. But I think Leibniz gave this concept of blank slate.
mm-hmm. It's funny
I
because
study philosophy.
yeah, I
I
have a
study
degree in that.
philosophy.
Yeah, it's one of my degrees as well. It's a form of seeking philosophy.
Yeah. I I saw your Facebook post in which you wrote that all types of philosophy, religion, uh, and other types of stuff which are about intellectual stuffs are out of the energy of seeking.
Yeah, they're seeking science as well, seeking the truth
Yeah,
that
yeah,
you
yeah.
already are, seeking to know something, to understand something, to then be able to end suffering. So that's why seeking is, because there's suffering, apparent suffering. And the reason there's pain and suffering is to make the world seem real.
Yeah. It's based on the premise that there is something to fix out there in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how could you fix a perfect world? That's a delusion of the ego mind, to fix a perfect world. It's already perfect, yet to the ego
Yeah.
mind, it doesn't seem perfect at all. It seems like hell.
Yeah. To the filtered mind, everything is imperfect in a way. Even the perfections are seen as imperfect by the filtered mind.
And what changes upon awakening is how things feel.
Yeah.
And so what the seeker is doing, the reason they're looking for knowledge, which doesn't exist, and every meta epistemologist knows that there's no such thing as knowledge, that when Plato said K equals JTB, that knowledge is justified true belief, obviously that's not the case, because we found different thought experiments where that doesn't compute, that there has to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
something else to it for knowledge to exist. And yet the foremost world experts on knowing what knowledge is, they don't know what knowledge is, because there isn't knowledge. And they're all going to seek truth, and there isn't truth, because you are the truth. Everyone's seeking, what is virtue? Socrates was awake.
Yeah. I saw your post in which you wrote about Socrates, Buddha, and some Buddha and Jesus, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, they were all awake. And so Jesus said, you know, that's the thing, right? Like what the Catholic Church has become is the total opposite of what Jesus was saying.
Yeah,
Jesus
it has
never,
become.
yeah, he never talked about there being sin and redemption. He talked about there being illusion and enlightenment. He knew there was no such thing as choice.
Actually, I think that most of the messages of the religions have become means filtered and covered over with the dogmas of the future
Yeah.
people, those who followed it.
The seekers
And
that came after. Yeah, the ego minds that
yeah,
then edited and filtered and tried to translate from one language to another. They go, well, he must have meant this and that because that's how I feel. So the
yeah,
seeking energy has a certain feeling tone, and it seeks to then know and understand, to then feel okay, to then feel complete, because it
yeah, correct.
feels like it's not complete. It feels like the world is wrong. It feels like there's something wrong. It doesn't know something or understand something, it feels something.
Yeah,
And that something is beyond words, beyond mind, and yet it's there. And so this shift in perspective, some people talk about it as if something changes in the brain, but really, ultimately, it seems to be something energetic that
yeah, correct,
changes.
correct.
And even and not every sage even notices that.
That's why it's sometimes called spirit. It's just like air, means it is energetic, but you can't conceptualize it or translate it into words.
Like it's very intimately connected to the body, but
Yeah,
it's not of the body. It's not, it's very deeply integrated, but it's not physical in the sense that we think of as physical.
yeah, it's not solid. It's
Yeah.
not something that is fixed. Means it is just like this. Means it is just moving, moving, moving. Means it is not still for a moment, and it is still also because motion also includes stillness to a certain extent.
Yeah. So you could view it from two different angles, from the Christian perspective or from the Kashmir Shaivism perspective, right? So you have, and they flip the genders, which is kind of cool. So from the Christian perspective, the way I might put it is there is this diamond matrix of the Virgin Mother, of
Yeah,
emptiness, non-form, unmoving. And then the firstborn beloved, the light bearer, is movement. Let there be light. So light is movement itself. It's the fastest
yeah,
thing that moves. And empty space is utterly always unmoving.
it's always at rest.
So in that sense, the void is feminine, like a womb or a diamond,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
untouched, the pristine virgin. And then there's light penetrating the void as movement, as time. And then from the Kashmir Shaivism perspective, you have Shiva, which is the
yeah.
unmoving male void.
Just just
And
different
then
names for the same thing.
the beloved Shakti is dancing as light, as lightning, as energy,
Yeah, as movement.
infinitely, as movement, as the beloved.
It can express as anything. Means it can express as stillness, movement, happiness, sadness, sorrow. It can
And there's
arise as
the,
anything.
yeah, and then you have the Buddhist perspective where they say the pregnant void. In other words, they realize
Yeah,
that these are connected as well, obviously. They're not two. So this void is infinite potential energy that is unmanifested. And it is every possibility. It is utter perfection. And then it manifests as what we call everything. And
so we are
so,
seeing that nearly every bit of the traditions you mentioned have somewhat a type of void in their religions.
Yeah, or in Western magic, we would call it the abyss. It's all the
Yeah,
same. Yeah.
yeah.
And it's
And
the,
now in non-duality circles, it's called emptiness
yeah.
by many teachers and speakers.
And that's probably borrowed from Buddhism. And that's a very good pointer. Yeah. Emptiness is probably, the best word for it. And emptiness is bittersweet. Anyone who really knows the emptiness, anyone who has really deeply tasted that emptiness, they won't praise it.
Yeah,
Even though it is exquisite, it is bittersweet. It's not something that's praised and worshipped and glorified, and it's also not something that's shunned. It's just what is. And yet there's also that energetic component, which is partly the nature of the void, or the potential nature of the void. So you'll see physics is be another perspective. They're trying to find a dark energy and they can't. And that's
yeah,
because
quantum mechanics.
it's because it's an inherent property of what they call empty space, which isn't actually empty. It's full of energy. So 70% of all the energy is dark energy, and they can't find it anywhere because it's the nature
Yeah,
of what they call emptiness, empty space, the intergalactic vacuum, if you will.
it's so intimate that the moment you try to know it, it is gone. Means
Yeah.
it's just this our conversation, the space
Yeah.
between our smartphones and
It's
USA
just
and
it's
India.
just two monkeys barking at each other.
Yeah, and nearly all the concepts we are using are just from the
Concept.
culture and society.
Yeah. Yeah, it's from the programming. It's from the cultural conditioning. And yet the seeker
But
thinks
isn't it
that if
great?
it what's that?
Isn't it great that we are able to communicate the
Exactly.
words
Especially
of the
upon
culture?
awakening, right? Like thank God upon awakening we don't just go comatose for the rest of our life. Like thank God you can still access language.
Yeah, and the the most doubtful premise that is accepted by most of society is that you need to think to speak. Means I am speaking, but there is no faculty inside my mind which is thinking and then speaking. It's just
Yeah.
speaking.
And people are very skeptical when I say that. I say, listen, now the words just happen. I'm not trying to
Yeah,
figure out what to say next. I'm watching the words happen as they happen.
yeah.
And they go, how is that possible? I don't know.
And it was
I don't need
just
to
like
know.
it was very amazing when this struck in my character that
So
it's
how
just
old are you now? And how old were you when the
uh,
shift happened?
actually I am 22 now, and I think I don't know anything much about this shift, but somewhere down the line something changed very much. I think 2 years earlier in 2019. After that, it was just like something felt very lighter and open to just being, in just sitting around and just watching the watching the birds play by
Yeah.
and just viewing things, and
Isn't
that
that
was it.
funny how like fulfilling just being is? Like just the fact that this body is still alive is plenty. It's like
Yeah.
beforehand nothing was enough, right? No matter what we did, no matter what we had, yada yada, nothing ever felt like it was enough. And now simply appearing to be alive is plenty. More than enough.
E- Even the tiniest things become wonderful.
Yeah. And enjoyable.
Yeah.
Everything becomes enjoyable. Anything becomes enjoyable rather than nothing is being, beforehand, nothing was enjoyable fully. Nothing was satisfying. Nothing was fulfilling. That's why the seeking continues. Because nothing in this world satisfies. That's really what the Buddha meant by life is suffering. He meant life as a seemingly existent entity is suffering. Once you realize, or once it's realized rather, that there isn't someone here,
Yeah,
suddenly this can enjoy this. What is can enjoy what is, even though it's not real. It's also not unreal, and we are grateful that it still appears, that the illusion is persistent, that there seems to be two of us, that the cultural
yeah,
conditioning isn't totally wiped clean, etc.
yeah. It's just manifesting through our bodies and through our speech. Maybe if this video is published, it might open something up for another character somewhere in the world,
Definitely.
and that's what is happening. Means I watched videos of some other characters transmitting this energy through language, and then it just moves on in the
Yeah.
apparent timeline.
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing that we can transmit energies through language also?
Exactly. Yeah. I don't know if you've watched any of my videos, but I actually talk about that quite a bit. People ask me, because I've had a Kundalini awakening as well back when I was
Yeah,
24. And then I had other energetic experiences before that, siddhis and glimpses and samadhi and things like that. But then liberation occurred at age 27, and I'm 31 now. But people often ask me if I'm able to transmit energy, Kundalini Shaktipat, and direct transmission. And the way I do it, if you did that, which I probably could if I wanted to, I probably could. But if I did, all it would do is give somebody a glimpse, and then they'd fall out of that glimpse, most likely.
yeah. It
So I
just
don't,
comes and goes.
yeah, and that can be very frustrating for the seeker to keep getting
Definitely.
Shaktipat and actually entering the non-dual state and then coming out of it. That can be very frustrating for the entire energy system. So, which can be dangerous.
Yeah,
So what I
that is more
do,
like
or
that
what
is
I should
more
say,
like searching for ice cream again and again. It's just
yeah,
like that material in the spiritual.
it's seeking an external source for that as well. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah, those things are valid. Like that does kind of exist within this dream. Um, but the way it happens here, I wouldn't say I'm doing it. It just kind of happens. There seems to be a more subtle but more permanent um, transmission of Shakti through the voice, like you were saying.
yeah,
So the energy is carried through the words, through the voice. It's really behind the words. It's not the words themselves. There's a Shakti in the tone of my voice, or in somehow this charge carries itself non-locally. So yes, somebody across the world can watch this video and they might not detect it, or they'll get a subtle transmission from this voice and that voice because that's
yeah,
occurring spontaneously. That's just the
yeah,
nature of these energy systems. And that's not always the case, but there is something about that. So people often ask if it's worth their time to sit there and listen to the words of sages. And it's like, well, kind of, but it's not necessarily the words. It's more how the energy is affecting the energy systems, but it's also kind of how the brain is being rewired, and certain patterns of
yeah,
activity are being shut down or reintroduced in a very unexpected way. And when the brain encounters something unexpected, it kind of has to work in a slightly different way. So the way I put it poetically is I say, this shift is an automatic transmission. And like in a car, if you have a manual shifter, you have to shift gears, you have to use your hand, you have to do something. But with an automatic transmission, it just happens. And the
yeah,
gears, the gears are actually magnetic. They lock together magnetically and shift magnetically. And that's a good metaphor for what's happening. There's a type of magnetic energy that is automatically shifting and automatically transmitting itself. And so, yeah, hopefully people will kind of listen to this video and receive that transmission.
Soak
Even
in
though
the
it's
energy.
subtle, it's more permanent. Yeah, exactly. Be marinated in it, saturated in it, and get
And
charged.
did you feel somewhere around your life, probably when you were having shifts, that there was some solidity in the center of your experience, and then that
Yeah,
solidity went away,
yeah, exactly. And that's
and then there was just energy.
yeah, that's one of the things we say in Advaita is it's centerlessness. And that's how it feels, right? It feels like there's somebody in here. It feels like I am the core of this. And then upon awakening, what's realized is you could say there is no core, or you could say the core is emptiness itself, or the void, or the abyss. There's different ways to express it, but
Yeah, you are
yeah,
having a nice
there's
cup of tea.
yeah,
Are you having coffee or tea?
green tea.
Green tea. It's nice for the health, probably better than
Yes.
coffee.
But it's also better for the energy levels and the stress hormones. If you drink coffee, you're elevating the stress hormones. Um, you're entering into beta brain entrained waves, which isn't helpful. So the thoughts are not as stable and deep. But if you have a more relaxed, enduring energy that isn't stressed, the brain waves are slower, which means they're more powerful. So, for example, the genius level frequency is a very slow brainwave. So the
Yeah,
faster your thoughts are, the more trivial they tend to be. So that's why if you enter into a very deep meditative state, you might have a very profound thought because you've entered into a slower yet more profound
yeah.
mind
That
frame.
that that's something which you said is just means touches my heart. Means that is what was felt here somewhere around the age of 18, I think. That you mentioned that just now. And it's very nice to interact like this,
Yeah,
because I can't come to USA, but on Zoom we are having the meeting. So isn't it amazing that I can watch you and you can watch me, and though we are physically at a distance, but
definitely.
it's
It's a form
happening.
of magic. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, the
every
entire
moment
world
is
is
a
magic,
magic.
but yeah. Yeah, definitely. But I have this strange mind frame where it's like I view everything from the human being from, 200,000 years ago. And so
Yeah.
right now we are two cavemen staring at magic rocks. And we're able to, like, this is mind blowing, So we're both staring at a magic rock and we can see each other and we can talk to each other, and that's actually happening within this dream.
Yeah, actually, if you went 2000 years earlier, and in a moment we could see each other on a piece of metal like this, then we were like, oh, what is this happening?
And this
How it is?
I personally, this is an ego-based, personal, dualistic mind type of belief, but I personally believe that the world does go in a cycle, just like the yugas we're talking about. But I tend to view
I
it the
agree with
way
it. I agree
I
with
tend to
it.
view it, but I think it's shorter than the traditional way of viewing it. Like I think Sri Yukteswar kind of had it right, and he's not the only one. Many people from all different cultures realize that there's this 24,000 year cycle, and so the world becomes united, and there's airports, and you know what I mean,
Yeah.
iPhones, things like that. And yet even now in this year we can't even try to build a pyramid. because we're not there
It's,
yet.
yeah.
It's too
And
advanced for us to recreate now.
one thing which you said, that the universe is cyclical, I very much agree with it, because every particle is cyclical. The moment we say a word, it goes around like this. The moment I
Yeah.
speak something, it goes, and then it's again at the start where I spoke it, and then it
Even
just does it
consciousness
normal.
itself is a loop. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, means whenever I look at
Consciousness
an
is a loop.
object,
Time is a loop. Yeah.
yeah, whenever I look at some object for, I think, 5 seconds, then it's just like, it is just like the moment I started to watch it. It just returns to its initial state without any
Yeah.
intense or uh, thought activity. So it is cyclical, I think, everything.
And the energy changes upon awakening as well. Like there's like a reset that happens. Like
Hmm.
so for
Hmm.
example, the energetic impressions of the day are wiped clean for the seeker every time they go into dreamless sleep, and then they wake up in the morning. But for the sage, it's like every 5 minutes is a new day.
Exactly,
Like it
exactly.
speeds up.
Oh,
So like the sage resets
exactly.
every 5 minutes, and they're like, the emotions, the energetic impressions are kind of wiped clean as if they had been in dreamless sleep for hours every 5 minutes.
It's amazing what you just said. It's just the time frame just becomes slow and slow. Means previously, I remember that to get over something, it took nearly, I think, 5 days, 5 or 6 days, and then now I'm just like, everything just arises and just passes away without any flickering.
And part of that, well, maybe all of it is that from the seeking energy, from the seeking mind's perspective, it's trying to desperately cling to this idea or story narrative that it's a permanent somebody moving through time and space, and it has to maintain
Yeah,
itself, and it's terrified for that self to go away at any point. So even when it spaces out, when it comes back, it goes, oh my god, where did I go for a minute? But from the
yeah,
sage's perspective, there's a presence as they space out and come back, and yet the self went away. And so the self is seen to be very impermanent, and we're very okay with that. We're not scared by that. That's actually quite enjoyable
definitely,
for the self to
definitely.
melt away and come back repeatedly, sometimes within seconds. Um, and that's what the seeker
Is
is
it
trying to do in meditation, but they might not realize that. And yet it's effortless as non-meditation for the sage. It just happens.
isn't it just like, you can see previously, you were some solid ice, which you considered a self, which moved through the ocean, and which was the connecting point for your memories, and then slowly the ice went away, means it turned into vapor, and then there was just the ocean, the energetic changing movements.
Yeah, so the ripening process is gradual, but awakening itself is very sudden, and
Yeah,
everything is different in less than a moment. Time is gone forever. You never were a separation. There never was a river. There never was a cloud. There has only been
yeah,
ocean. And yet, oh wow, there still seems to be rivers and clouds. Oh good. And yet the interesting thing about awakening here anyway, and it's probably similar everywhere, but we all process it a little differently, and some
yeah.
of us are more ready for it than others in different ways. But when it happened here, there was just total calm. There was no laughing, no
Relax.
crying. It was just totally neutrally calm, the calmest thing ever. And yeah,
that
it,
that
it
is
just
that is why in Buddhism they say nirvana is blowing out, means
yeah,
it is not some
cessation.
fantastical experience, it's cessation of all
Yeah,
mental
it's
fabrications
stopping.
and
Yeah,
stopping.
and that's what this hand gesture means usually in India. It means stop. The mind. Stop the mind.
Stop
So
means stop is said here as rukiye. In Hindi, it is rukiye.
so I do this. Both of them. Just stop.
Actually, I have one hand holding my phone. That's why I'm doing like this. But the radical non-duality is the end. There is no ocean either.
Yeah, the way I like to put it is, I always like to take phrases like that and then like change them a little bit. Sometimes with humor, sometimes to like one up it, you know. But for that one, I say the ocean has gone fishing.
Oh, great. Oh, great. Great. It's a great metaphor. Amazing.
It's
Actually, I
amazing that we
laugh
can
out.
even be amazed. What's that?
Laugh out that every moment we are starting as if the interview has just started. Means the
Yeah.
meeting has just started.
Yeah.
It's just like I am seeing you for the first time, and every
Yeah.
moment
And I can
and
feel
every
us
word
both
is just
resetting every few seconds. Yeah, it's interesting because if a seeker was watching this, they would see
ripples.
it like the past is leading into the future and that there's these two stable identities over
Yeah,
time. And
definitely.
that's not how we're experiencing it right now.
Yeah, it's just some
We're coming and
disjointed.
going every few seconds. Yeah.
Yeah, we ourselves are coming and going every moment. Your chair is somewhat like the chair of Osho.
Oh, I never thought of that. I do like this chair. It feels, I like it. I don't know what it is about this chair. Yeah.
It gives you the energetic vibes of the Kundalini awakening, which you had at the age of 24.
Good. Uh,
you write you quote other speakers, and I watched those photos of yours in which you quote sometimes every teacher, and I read through those and I feel nice about those quotes.
sorry, I only half heard what you said. Can you say that again?
uh, can you hear me?
Kind of, yeah.
uh, I just said that I like your posts on Facebook.
Cool. Yeah, I've been slowly cultivating my Facebook profile for about a decade now, and the awakening has only been the past 4 years. I've been in the awakened state, but I've been rambling on and on about awakening for years before that. But from the seeker's perspective, you know, kind of like an advanced seeker, but still a seeker.
Yeah,
So it's funny to go back, you know,
and
7,
review
8
it.
years ago, yeah, and then look at it and like, well, wow, it's very different from what I'm saying now. Some of it's
Wow,
spot on,
wow,
you know. Yeah, wow. Yeah, like Tony says,
wow.
wow.
It's just like the mask, Jim Carrey. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And the funny thing about that is Jim Carrey's awake now too.
Yeah, he writes on Instagram.
Huh.
Can you hear me, na? In a
Yeah,
good way,
yeah, I can
or
hear you.
is it rumbling? Is it
Yeah, no,
rumbling
it's
my
good.
voice?
It's good.
Yeah.
No, it's good. Aha.
Aha.
Ah. Ah.
Uh, you studied both psychology and philosophy,
Hmm?
both the subjects. So,
Yeah.
uh, what was your experience? Means, did you find it related, or was there uh, were there many types of means dissimilarities also? Because I am studying only philosophy.
Yeah, they're I used to say psychology is the study of the mind and philosophy is the using of the mind. So in that way they're linked, but I also kind of delved into like neuroscience and comparative language, and linguistics and etymology and things like that. I took a lot of extra advanced courses and things, but they're both seeking from this perspective now.
Yeah,
So science is seeking, philosophy is seeking, and yeah, this realization and seeking. So this realization is somehow beyond physics. It's beyond the
philosophy.
scientific method. It's beyond the guessing mind of philosophy. So it's weird now because it's almost like a living sage is the real expert on everything in a certain way. Like sometimes I'll pick up the Dhammapada and I'll start reading the words of the Buddha and I'll say, no, he didn't say that. I can tell. Yeah, he actually said that. I can tell. You can tell
Yeah, yeah,
what's being spoken from the awakened state and what isn't. And the seeker doesn't have that. And the seeker can't even bring itself to trust the discernment of a sage, most likely, because it thinks that it
yeah,
knows and can know. But we can kind of see things like, oh wow, yeah, clearly Socrates was awake. He knew there was
yeah,
no such thing as virtue. That's why he was asking them, so what is virtue? Oh, you know things. So what is virtue? And
yeah,
you can see how religions have been edited and flipped upside down. And you can also see
yeah.
what gems trickled in successfully. And you can, like, for example, I can probably explain quantum physics in about 7 seconds.
Explain it.
The
There is no one.
observer, yeah, there's no observer and observed because there's not two. So in a
Yeah,
way, you could water that down and say the observer is the observed. So of course it has an apparent effect on it. And yet, even our best quantum physics now has demonstrated that cause and effect kind of work both ways. Like the effect can cause the cause type of thing. Like they're that linked.
yeah.
Of course they are. They're not two.
And I think Jiddu Krishnamurti said this, na? The observer is the observed.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Jiddu
sure.
Krishnamurti.
Makes sense. I always liked him. Yeah.
And I also like Socrates in the sense that he always questions everything. Means he goes
Yeah.
through a method of dialectic,
Right.
and he doesn't stop at anything. Means he questions. That's why we can say that he's awake. Means he doesn't
Yeah.
accept any preconceived ideas.
And I just realized what Socrates was doing just now. What he was doing was he was a sage pretending to be a desperate seeker.
Yeah,
Because people hate sages. That's why they murdered him, because they caught on.
yeah,
You're not really a seeker. You're claiming to have realized. Kill him, just like they did with Jesus. So he was going around
now,
like, well, so what is virtue? Please tell me. Like he was pretending like he didn't understand. He didn't know what was going on. even though he did, he had realized.
And many of the philosophers are only clinging to rationalism or empiricism, but both
Yeah.
are limited. Means you can't get to it either through the reason or through
Exactly.
experience.
Exactly.
I think Immanuel Kant was the one who tried to reconcile both, but I think he also didn't get far.
Yeah. Yeah. I always liked Kant and German idealism. It comes close, but they're still kind of stuck in the intellect. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. So you see like uh,
Wittgenstein.
Wittgenstein, yeah, and Kant. And Albert Einstein once said that his greatest intellectual debt was to Immanuel Kant's critique of pure reason.
Yeah,
He also said that imagination is more important than knowledge. And what Einstein was doing was he was simply meditating on light. He was contemplating the nature of light. That's all he was doing.
yeah.
And the only thing Tesla was doing was meditating and contemplating the nature of electricity or lightning.
Actually, everything you see is trying to go towards that final void. Means every art means they are trying to reach that state, but that one thought of intellect, it is stopping them. But it's all just apparently only.
Yeah, yeah. There's actually nothing happening. Not even that. We can't even talk about it really, but
Yeah,
we can talk about what seems to be happening within this dream. And even Einstein and Tesla, they spoke from a perspective outside of time.
yeah,
They spoke from a timeless perspective. They might not have been awake necessarily, but they were able to slip into a type of meditative state that was very, very deep.
yeah,
And
definitely.
from that perspective, there is no time.
And now people are amazed that Einstein was having a very great IQ. No, he was not having a very great
Yeah,
IQ. He slipped into meditative states, and that's why
yeah,
on in those moments he had some insights.
yeah. He was strengthening what in yoga we call the golden cord, and in neuroscience we call it the corpus callosum, the connection. There's a
Or
C-shaped
yeah,
bundle of nerves that connect the two hemispheres, and he was doing that. But he would basically shut all the lights off, sit in a dark room, and then enter that state for 14 hours straight. And he would it
oh,
was basically yogic concentration what he was doing. It was a very deep meditative state, but it was also a form of yogic concentration.
and do you also went through the Advaita Vedanta of Shankaracharya in your philosophy course, or did they teach only Western
No.
philosophy?
Yeah, they only taught Western philosophy for the most part. I had to take extra
E-
classes to delve into Latin American philosophy and Chinese philosophy, things like that. No, but I went to a Christian college, a Jesuit university, but I was like extremely Buddhist and extremely like Zen, Vajrayana, Kriya Yoga type perspective, a Taoist perspective type thing. And then, then I learned the kind of the Western side of that. I Yeah, so in the West, they it's funny too because all the most potent philosophers from the West basically just copy pasted from the East.
Yeah, definitely. Means if
like
you look
like
at
people,
Spinoza,
yeah,
he's
so
saying
many of them.
that there is only one pantheism. He is just copying from the Advaita in Eastern
Yeah. Oh,
traditions.
okay. Yeah, that's a good point. And then you have like some of the early Greeks, some of the foundational pillars of Western philosophy. People always say, "Wow, they came up with such an original idea that structured the rest of Western civilizations." Like they just stole that from the East and said, "Wow, we
Yeah,
Greeks came up with this." And it's like,
yes,
okay, but it's not
that's
quite
what
right.
I see when I read. Firstly, I read Eastern, and then I read Western, and I think that was something which was said in the Eastern
Yeah,
text.
and it was said thousands of years prior.
Yeah.
It wasn't 10 years, it was 2,000 years, and now they're like, okay. But and some people even believe that Jesus went to the east and then came back, and that's where his message came from. And that kind of does make sense if you think about it. That's why it was such a novel idea in the West. He brought the
Yeah.
Eastern wisdom back from the awakened perspective, from the Kundalini charged perspective as well. And I think it's hilarious because as a seeker, I was thinking about getting my PhD in philosophy, and I was thinking, okay, like I'm seeing a connection between like Nietzsche and Buddhism, for example. But then years later, I find out like, okay, like Schopenhauer was Nietzsche's mentor, and
Yeah.
Schopenhauer was the foremost expert on Buddhism in the West. And Nietzsche probably didn't even himself realize how much of Schopenhauer's message came directly from Buddhism. So Nietzsche's entire worldview is Buddhistic, and he doesn't even probably realize that that's where it comes from. So it appears to us as this new idea in a new packaging, and people are going, wow, isn't this mind-blowing, the connections between Nietzsche and
Wow.
Buddhism? And it's like, well, when you know what happened, it's
Well,
pretty obvious that and in the West we have all these sciences based on the material
atoms.
witnessing of it, right? But they don't
Yeah.
explore the witnessing itself. They totally reject phenomenology, which is what Buddhism has to offer as a science, or what the yogic sciences have to offer, is this exquisitely mapped terrain of that which can be experienced, of awareness itself. And if you trace that back far enough, you could get some very deep insight that science is utterly blind to. And if you talk to somebody that's wanting to be, if you talk to a seeker who really doesn't know a whole lot other than what their textbook tells them, and you try to talk to them about the semi-vestigial physiology from the yogic texts about the body that are obviously the case, they don't have any idea. If you open a behavioral neuroscience textbook, there will be one sentence about the pineal gland, and it'll say produces serotonin and melatonin, helps you sleep and wake up. That's all it'll say. It won't say anything. Won't say anything about the fact that it technically transmutes L-tryptophan into 5-HTP, into serotonin, into melatonin, into pinoline, into 5-MeO-DMT, into NN-DMT, which is this 5-dimensional molecule that they don't say any of that. They say, oh yeah, it produces melatonin, makes you sleepy. Okay, moving on. And that's all they know. And that's all the textbook says. And it's an advanced textbook, and that's all it says about that gland. And the glands are the control switches for the entire body. And that's the highest gland. You have to understand that your body prioritizes the quality of blood, for example. In other words, your body knows what the most important parts of itself are. And so it'll give your brain the highest quality blood out of your whole body. And out of your brain, it'll give the pineal gland the highest quality blood out of the entire brain. And it's the only part of the brain that is not two. It's the only part of the brain that doesn't have two lobes or hemispheres. There's only one.
Actually, Descartes also mentioned that body and mind are connected with the pineal gland. I think.
So he was right about the gland, but obviously he was a dualist because he thought there was a mind and a body.
Yeah.
And he was wrong when he said, I think, therefore I am. Because what he was saying was, and it's cool that a sage can even say, oh yeah, he was wrong. Like matter of factly, for sure.
The eye cannot be verified.
I promise he was wrong. Because he was trying to doubt as well, right? So like in the Zen tradition, we say, where there is great doubt, there is great awakening. Where there is no doubt, no awakening. So Descartes was wrong because he said, I seem to be a thinking thing. And at least that I cannot doubt.
Yeah.
I seem to be a thinking thing. So I don't know if I'm in a simulation or a dream or a brain in a vat or what, but at least I know that I'm a thinking thing. But Descartes was wrong because there is no thinker and there are no things. And that's very apparently obvious to every sage who has had this realization. So there is no thinker. He was wrongly assuming that because there seems to be a thinker, that I exist as a separate being. And not only am I separate from everyone else and everything else, I'm separate from my own self and my own body. And I have a body and a mind. All of that's not the case. He was wrong about that.
Brain secretes thoughts automatic.
Yeah. But I'll defend him as well on another level, because some people will make fun of him and they'll say, well, he believed in animal spirits. What the hell was that? And it's like, well, no, I think he was just talking about hormones. I think what he meant by animal spirits was they didn't have a word or a concept for it back then, but he was talking about the importance and the role of hormones in the body and how they affect consciousness. So he was again talking about the endocrine system. And in yoga, we talk about, in the yogic sciences, they talk about the chakras. And there's not only an endocrine gland at each one of these spots, and not only a nerve plexus at each one of these spots, but the spine itself even changes directions at each one of these spots. And there's also seemingly these astral energetic kind of organs, if you will, of the energy body to transmute energy. So it's interesting how that all relates or doesn't into itself.
Yeah. Is this amazing that how people come up with such interesting theories?
Yeah. Like it makes sense why they thought that. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, yeah, I get it. Like, but it's just so interesting to have some famous philosopher or some, and then to realize, oh, that was the seeking energy. But they, you can see where they got certain aspects of it right and where they got certain aspects of it wrong. But it's funny too, because the seeker will get rubbed the wrong way. They'll say things like, well, how can you say that with such a matter-of-fact, straight face, like you actually know something? How could you possibly do that? And it's like, well, yes, this is directly realized. Not everything is directly realized, only certain things, like some aspects are a dualistic ego mind based belief on a personal level. And I'll make that distinction. I'll say this is what was realized upon awakening, and that's not up for debate. All these personal beliefs I also seem to have, those are up for debate. We can debate that because it's personal to that's fine. Because you know what I mean?
Yeah. I can definitely see what you mean. Wow.
Wow. It's funny too, because sages are like babies in a way. It's like we have the baby eyes. We see everything so fresh without needing it to be conceptualized. Like it still gets conceptualized, but it doesn't need to be. There's no desperation to there's no desperation out of fear to figure out what's going on. Once it's realized that this is
there is no need to translate experience into anything.
And not only is this not happening, all of this, not only is it not happening, it can never happen. And here it is. Here it seems to be. It can never happen. There can never be a Big Bang. There can never be a universe or a world, I promise. And yet look around. Oh, it's a miracle.
Yeah.
That there seems to be anything. after
The,
realizing that there can't ever be anything.
the translator is wiped away from between.
Yeah.
There is no one who is translating anything into any concept or words. But translation is just happening without any translator.
And people who are professional translators, over the course of their careers, they tend to notice that words don't actually have meaning. And
Yeah,
that all these things are just stories, and they could be translated, they could be told any other way. And that every system is totally arbitrary. It could have been done any other way. So we're just kind of playing make believe. Some people
yeah,
call spirituality make believe, but really the entire world is make believe. The
yeah.
entire world is a fairy tale, is a daydream.
The-
And yet,
actually, the basic premise of every sentence is itself arbitrary because it is I, and I
yeah,
is arbitrary,
I
and
I is the primary
the-
delusion. And we tend to
yeah,
begin every sentence with I.
I I can't find any I anywhere.
Yeah, it's because there isn't one, and you can see clearly.
Yeah. I am just loving your chair.
Me too. I like it. Something about it. I like the
It
shape of
has
it.
it has got the energetic vibes of every philosopher, and especially Descartes. Descartes. Actually, Descartes said that before saying "I think, therefore I am," he mentioned that I will doubt everything that can be doubted.
And
But
he just didn't go far enough. He should have
he
taken it
didn't
one
go
step
far enough.
further. Yeah, if he
Yeah,
doubted that I am the thinker, if he was able to break through that, he would have found it, maybe.
but I
But he was
think
trying to use the mind.
he realized it, but that would destroy him as a philosopher, and he would not be able to
Oh,
conceptualize that understanding in
possible.
words. That's why
Well,
he thought.
it's he. I think he was using the mind, and that's as far as the mind can go. So
Yeah,
it can keep going beyond that point, but not with the mind. So when realization does happen, there's no mind to be found anywhere. There's no such
yeah,
thing as mind. And so he was saying there's a mind and there's a body. If he was in the awakened state, he'd realize that the mind and the body are not two. And he's saying they are
yeah,
two. So Descartes
yeah.
is the ultimate dualist, according
He's
to the Western curriculum of a philosophy student. Descartes is the symbol, the poster boy for dualism.
of dualism,
Yeah,
and he's talking about God as the ultimate substance, and he's taking mind and body as independent substance. He didn't thought that how can he take God as some substance and uh, then demarcate two different independent substance out of God.
yeah, and the Western civilization is essentially founded on Aristotelian scientism, and they've
Yeah,
missed quite a bit by staying too focused on Aristotle. I think if they looked at Plato and things like that a little more, but they don't. They look at Aristotle as the ultimate. Our our Western civilization, especially in the United States, is very neo-Roman, and I think that's to its own detriment.
yeah. I think Plato was somewhat close to this understanding because he was an idealist. I think that the idealists were probably close to the energetic understanding of
Yeah,
the
Plato,
sages.
Plato. Yeah, and I had a glimpse once of, well, it was kind of a samadhi experience of in a multi-dimensional geometric shape of light above my head that was like my energy body type of energy signature, And it reminded me afterwards of Plato. Plato was always like pointing up just above his head and talking about the forms. And I was like, oh my God, I wonder if he saw this stuff too, you know? And one other thing that I really need to say is I've noticed something, and I don't know if this has been brought up very much in classical philosophy, but I see the bridge or the origin of Western thought. In other words, you can trace things back. If you look at Western civilization, you can trace that back to Rome. And if you look at
Yeah,
Roman civilization, you can trace that back to the Greeks. And if you look at the Greeks, you can trace that back to the Egyptians. And that's where it stops for most classical philosophers. But what I noticed is that you can trace the Egyptians back to India.
yeah,
And most people don't know that. Most people don't realize that if you read the Egyptian origin stories, they say we're from a land to the east. It's a peninsula with this and that animal and plant. And they're talking about India. And if you look at the genetics of genetically Egyptian people, they're Indian. They moved away a long time ago and they adapted to their environment, but the facial bone structure is almost identical. There's like certain things you can see. The genetics are that's where they're from. I don't know how they
yeah,
got there, but that's where they're from. So there's this thread from India to Egypt to Greece to Rome. And most people can see that in like Alexandrian culture because it's Egypto-Greco-Roman, and yet there's still the bridge they're not noticing in Western philosophy. The thing they don't notice is that, yeah, essentially that all their belief systems come from the East originally, which is hilarious because they march around like they've got it and they don't realize where it even came from. It's just a
yeah.
repackaging into a different format, into a different culture that did something different with it.
Actually, I think that the energy is the only translator which is making everything translate to each one of us. And the moment and the number of times it is the original energy is translated, it seems to get diluted and means it gets to covered over with more and more translations, and the
Yeah, more and more
message of the original,
conceptual.
yeah, and the message of the original translator is lost in that process.
Yeah, yeah, and you notice that trend across the board, right? Like you take
Yeah,
something really potent like Kriya Yoga, Lahiri Mahasaya's Kriya Yoga. He passes it to Sri Yukteswar and it gets watered down a little bit. He passes that to Yogananda and it gets watered down a little bit. Yogananda goes to the West and it gets extremely watered down. Just so he hopes the Americans will, okay, I get it now. He's trying to introduce them to it. So he has to really water it down to hope that they get something from it. But you can trace that back and back. And when you go back to the original source, it's more potent and it's more like grown up, it's more
yeah,
advanced. It's not the, the child version of it type of thing. But that's the East and the West desperately need each other in that sense. It's like the West has a lot to say about how to go about investigating the seemingly material world and how to structure a
yes, yes,
scientific inquiry and empiricism and all these things, but they also desperately need the phenomenological sciences of awareness from the East. And if we finally bridge that gap, and I think we will, it's just a matter of time for them to connect the dots as to what just happened over the past 13,000 years or whatever. You'll notice our history kind of stops if you go back about 13,000 years or 11,800 years or whatever it is. You go back about that amount of time and history stops. And
yeah.
it seems like there was some world cataclysm that knocked us back into the Stone Age repeatedly.
uh, do you think that David Hume was a Buddhist?
I don't know. I never really
because
studied Hume a whole
because
lot. I know he was
he,
the one for empiricism and everything, but yeah,
he
empiricism is kind of like the opposite of Buddhism in a way, because like empiricism is using that externally,
yeah
but it's not talking about what is experienced internally. So it's not talking about the process of experiencing. It's only talking about the apparent physical world. And you can't really trust your senses if you're in the seeking energy, you can't really trust your senses. Once you're in
yeah
the awakened state, the five gates are cleansed, as it were. In Buddhism, they'd say that. But the senses are heightened, they're clean, they're clarified in a way that you can see clearly, hear clearly. Jesus would say, "Let they who have ears hear." And what he means is, the seeker can't. There's a brick wall in between the seeker and this message of clarity. And so we're not talking to the persona, we're talking to that which is behind it, right? Or the way Osho would put it is, you say, do you realize that the word personality comes from the Greek persona, which literally means the sound of the voice of the actor from behind the mask.
oh, that is amazing. I heard it for the first time.
And
Yeah,
persona
is the voice
persona
clear, or
basically means like a false personality. Sorry, what were you saying?
is is my voice clear, or is
Yeah,
it is
yeah, I can hear you.
yeah? Because I think that sometimes my headphone is getting a lot sharper. This headphone is not too great either, but that is
Yeah,
also
it
fine.
kind of it kind of cut out earlier a little bit, but it's been fine since
Yeah,
then. Yeah.
yeah. Actually, Hume was the one who rejected the sense of self.
Oh.
He didn't say that there is anything which we can call a self, and he rejected causality also in a way, because he
Oh,
said that
good. Wow.
the cause and effect is only due to the merging of two events, which is just a fabrication. And he said
Nice.
that we can't find a self because whenever I look for a self, I only stumble upon some memory from the past.
Nice. Yeah, he might have borrowed the no self. Maybe he was awake. I don't know. I never really studied Hume a whole lot because as a seeker, I was like, oh, empiricism. Okay, moving on. But yeah, maybe he was onto something there because I would say he took it from Buddhism, but it's actually more clear than Buddhism in a way because he's talking about the fact that there's no cause and effect, right? Howard and I talk about that a lot, how Buddhism is too cause and effect, you know. They talk about cause
Yeah,
and effect, and it's like, well, there isn't any, so you're losing me.
yeah,
And yet they talk about no self, which is very obviously the case. And so if you kind of situate yourself somewhere between Advaita and Buddhism, they share no self.
yeah,
But
definitely.
cause and effect, the fact that he was saying there is no self and there's no cause and effect, that's kind of even beyond traditional Buddhism in a way, because again, Buddhism talks too much about cause and effect and there isn't any. Everything is a causal.
A causal.
Yeah. Sourcelessness.
And have you heard about Nagarjuna? Nagarjuna.
Yeah. Hmm?
He was a Buddhist who rejected the entire system. Means he said that there is no suffering, there is no dependent origination. Means he just said that you can't say of anything that it is or it isn't. You can't affirm or neither deny.
It's like,
He
Buddhism comes close. Like there's less like if you compared Buddhism to Catholicism, for example, it's pretty clear that Catholicism is just taking everything Jesus ever said, thought, believed, and stood for and flipping it upside down and setting it on fire, which is very unfortunate. But if you look at Buddhism, more of it got correctly transmitted into the present moment, if you will. More of it got passed down correctly, yet there were still distortions within that.
yeah.
So the fact that there's no self got correctly passed down, but suddenly cause and effect are popping up because the seekers keep injecting things.
Everybody is only adding translations. And they are making the original translation dwindle.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, the animals don't have that problem.
Yeah.
And the animals are all awake.
Yeah.
All the animals are in the awakened state.
Especially the wolf.
Yeah. And if you were raised by wolves, you'd be in the non-dual state.
Non-dual
So
state.
it's not just the awakened state, you know, it's not just it's not something about our genetics as human, it's something about our programming more so that kicks this suffering into gear.
Yeah.
Because small children don't have this problem, sages don't have this problem, but 99.9% of adult humans have this apparent problem of suffering and seeking, trying to understand and translate and project meaning and story.
What if we didn't need to translate?
Yeah, like it's obvious that like 70% of all communication is body language.
Yeah. Like this.
So obviously words, you know? So if that's the case, that kind of shows us something about the lack of importance of words. Words are silly, you know?
Yes. It's just flowing out, but
Yeah.
it's
Even the concept of non-duality is just a silly word.
can I say something?
Yeah.
The best translation is no translation.
Yeah. Yeah. The best mind is no mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you enjoy spaghetti?
When you said that, what I saw in my mind was like, oh, you know, when a little baby's eating spaghetti, it'll get it all over itself. It's like wearing the bowl as a hat. There's just spaghetti everywhere. Oh man.
Yeah, actually, we don't eat spaghetti here. We eat chow mein a lot.
Ah, I'm on a special diet right now for autoimmune stuff. So I
You
can
are
only
on a
eat certain vegetable pastas and things. A very
you are on a
restrictive diet right now.
you are on a non-dual diet.
Or you only consume nothing and then you pass away. No.
It starts off with nothing and then it becomes nothing. And in the middle, it's also nothing.
Not even that.
Not not even nothing.
Yeah, there's not even nobody here. People
Yeah,
ask the question. They say, "Well, Ramana told me to say, who am I?" Like, yeah, but that's the wrong question. Because who
because there is no
assumes
I.
there is somebody here? There isn't.
Yeah, but there is something. Can I tell
Yeah,
what it is?
yeah.
It is
It's just not a person.
no. It is just laughing.
It's a. Well, the way I put it, this might be a little controversial within radical non-duality. I'm kind of a heretic, but I would say there's this vast, impersonal, spacious background awareness, this awareing.
Yeah,
So it's not nothing, but that's how the mind would perceive it. To the seeking mind, this message is abject nihilism.
actually, you have a
It's
very
not,
great
but
you have a very great non-dual tool. Can I tell you what it is?
oh, you're cutting out on me. You all froze up. Looks like your internet's taking a dip. You're at 1 bar. There you are. I
Can
lost you
you
there for
hear
a
me?
minute. Yeah, your internet dipped for a minute there. It's still kind of low, but I can hear you now. I can see you again.
Your headphone is not too.
Yeah, that's right. I never noticed that. That's hilarious. I promise I didn't do that on purpose. It just happened. That's funny. I never noticed that. That is funny. I have a non-dual headset. I love it. Another funny thing about this is it's the Blue Parrot brand.
Yeah,
You know, some people just parrot the words and don't really have the realization. Takes a certain kind of confidence to be a non-dual speaker with a Blue Parrot headset. A non-dual headset. That's so funny. I never even noticed that. Oh.
oh,
Ah. Oh.
is black your favorite T-shirt?
It is now. After awakening, it is.
Only black and white.
Just black.
It's the best representation of the impersonal void.
It's the best representation of radical non-duality, specifically, I think, because to the seeking mind, the sage is kind of like the bad guy. You know, he's coming to kill the self, and they don't like that. And so
What about the, what
this is
about the
like,
red?
yeah, this is like being a pirate, and also it's like being the bad guy, the villain. But
Joker,
yeah, 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 yeah,
Joker of
exactly.
Batman.
Yes.
He's my favorite one, favorite villain.
Oh, good. People call me that sometimes.
No, I, I sometimes think that I have seen you somewhere. Means physically. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think your face resembles uh, some of my relatives' face.
Ah.
That's why I thought like that. Who is your favorite villain in the movies?
Hmm. I guess the Joker.
Same, 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 same. Everything is just ha 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 ha.
Yeah, why so serious?
Why so serious? It
Upon
started off.
awakening, the seriousness kind of gets sucked out of the mind, you know, because the world isn't what it seems to be. It's like if you were playing a video game and taking it really seriously. It's like, okay, but that's not quite the healthiest mind frame. You're supposed
Yeah,
to have fun and enjoy it. It's a game. Relax, man.
it's a game. It's a game.
It's a movie. It's a game. It's a book. It's a story.
It's a book.
It's a daydream.
Yeah. It's it's it's
And now
this.
for something completely different.
Yeah.
Monty Python's Flying Circus. It's
Just like this.
wow. That says it best, I think. That was the most eloquent thing. Yeah, that face.
No, this.
That really sums it up. Oh man, I think I have to get going. I just realized what time it was. But that was a perfect ending. Man, it's
The
been an
time
absolute pleasure talking to you. It was so good to talk to you, man. This is good.
the time just went away in just a blink.
Yeah, just timelessness.
Some days we can have it for 5 hours.
Yeah, probably effortlessly. I did that with Howard the one day. We just started chatting and I looked up 5 hours had gone by. I was like, oh crap. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, man, I'll see you around. We'll have to chat again in one form or another. So thank you so much.
Great talking to you. Bye.
You too, man. See you, buddy.